Mark McKinnon has been a political consultant for years. He's respected by everybody I know in politics.
Just look for the hat.
So my dad was a rancher for a while.
And he had a hat just like this one.
I can't sit down with a cowboy and not drink whiskey.
We do a lot of
bourbon, single malt.
Oh, Jesus. Whoa.
That's Texas right there.
Hey guys.
Hey y'all, we're back. We weren't gone too long. I guess we were gone about a week.
Long enough for y'all to miss us.
But for those of you that may be watching this potentially for the first time, this is Taste the Trail. My name is Spencer Whelan.
And I'm Sarah Whelan.
And we are running the Texas Whiskey Trail. We also work with the Texas Whiskey Association that you can see here. But what we're doing tonight is a very, very special episode because my history is I spent some time working in public affairs and politics. I worked at a company called Public Strategists here in Austin, Texas. And while I was there, one of the senior people at Public Strategists was a gentleman named Mark McKinnon. And Mark is a fantastic human being, one of the best political minds that I've ever known in my life. He's been a mentor to me. He's helped me on a lot of different things throughout my career. And we haven't talked in a while, but tonight we get to talk for the first time. And part of it's because we're all at home, so they can't be doing their normal thing, which is shooting episodes of the Circus.
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar with the Circus, that is a show on Showtime that is a week-by-week documentary of the political process during an election year or otherwise. I think it was originally going to be just the election year, but it was so popular, and frankly, the Circus has continued.
Yeah.
So it continues to be a show. I think they're going into their 5th season, but we'll talk about that for a second with Mark. First, before we get started, I want to give everybody an update on where we are on the Still Strong TX campaign. We have, and there you can see this hashtag Still Strong TX. You can still go to get a t-shirt over at TexasWhiskeyTrailStore.com. And you can take action on this project at StillStrongTX.com. So please consider doing that if you haven't already. And what this whole campaign started as is a way to support distilleries who are making sanitizer. So
That's right.
we were spending all of our time. Why don't you tell them what you were doing for part of that time? Like I was spending a lot of time on the phone with reading FDA reports and guidance documents, but you were also helping.
Yeah, I was trying to find bottles.
Yeah.
Like literally finding bottles was easy. Finding like caps or like spray pumps or like it's a whole nother world, y'all. And I had no idea what I was doing. And but that was kind of the case for everyone. And that's what this distilling or what the sanitizer thing has been about, right? These distillers saw that there was a need. I mean, hospitals,
fire, EMS.
Yeah, sheriff's offices came to them saying like, we need sanitizer for our first responders to keep them safe. We can't find any anywhere. And so our distillers, because they're awesome, may be biased, but they really are. And they stepped up to the plate and in a big way.
Yes.
What, is it over 1 million?
So as of a survey that we took at the end of last week, Texas has now produced over 1 million gallons of hand sanitizer, which is ridiculous. I don't know that that's the top in the nation, but I'd be hard pressed to find another state that's done something close to that. About 20% of that's been given away. That equals about 9.8, almost $10 million now, I'm sure, of donated sanitizer in terms of retail value.
I mean, I recently did a quick Google search to see what's been donated like elsewhere, and I really didn't see that much. Yeah. So I think what we've done is spectacular. I know other distillers in other states have been doing things. But
distillers across the country, especially craft distilleries, have come to the aid.
But you're not seeing that from the major companies that usually produce sanitizer.
That's right.
And so we stepped in and we thought, well, what's something that we could do to help these guys out? So we thought, actually, I thought I'm not very good at nosing and tasting, or I just haven't done it. I fake my way through it usually when we're at events. I like them either. I like it or I don't like it. And that's about as much as you get out of me. So I thought, well, this would be interesting. Let's go through the whole entire trail.
Yep.
We'll taste products from each place and see if I get any better. I think I did. I still get confused with rye and bourbon. I don't see how I still get confused by those two, but
it's okay.
that's where we are in life, y'all. And so, yeah.
So we did 20 episodes,
That's right.
19 trail episodes, plus we had the women and whiskey episode.
Yeah. So you can go back and watch any of those on our Facebook or YouTube page. And
yep. But tonight, like I said, we have an amazing human being to join us tonight. Really kicking our coverage in terms of the guest quality that we have here. It's going to all be downhill from here. Mark McKinnon, how are you, Mark? It's a pleasure to see you. Hook 'em, sir.
Yes, sir. How are you? How are you, homies?
We're doing good. I mean, as good as could be expected. We've thrown the kids upstairs. They got chicken nuggets, and they're watching TV on our bed. And
only the best. Fingers crossed it's not a complete disaster when we go up there later. But
it will be.
Yeah.
Chicken nuggets upstairs, whiskey downstairs. That's a good strategy.
Oh, yeah.
Mark, I've got to rat out one of our neighbors who told me when they heard that you were coming on, they told me that they had a man crush. This was another man. He said he has a man crush on you because you've always got that amazing cowboy hat and look so cool. And what brought about wearing the hat all the time?
Well, I say it's an affectation, but it's not a recent one. There's not a picture of me growing up that I don't have a hat on. Spencer, you remember back in the day, I was always wearing a hat, right? So
every day.
And my dad was a rancher for a while, and he had a Stetson hat just like this. This is called an open road style, which is also called the presidential hat because LBJ wore this hat, Truman did, Eisenhower did, a bunch of presidents wore this hat. And the reason they did, and the reason it was popular, is that it's kind of a gentleman's hat. It's a little bit more formal. The brim is not as wide as a lot of cowboy hats are, so it's just a little dressier. And I just, I used to like explore around in my dad's closet to look at all the cool dad stuff. Excuse the airplane going by, but of all the cool stuff in that closet, the Stetson was the coolest thing. Yeah. And I couldn't wait till I was old enough to have my own Stetson. So it wasn't long before I did. And, I just, the irony is that since I'm always wearing a hat, a lot of people assume that I'm bald, but as you can see, I'm actually not.
Yes. So why don't you give a shout out to your favorite Texas hatters? Because I know you.
Oh yeah, well, Austin. My favorite is Aspen Hatters, which is actually started in Austin.
Right.
And they now have a shop in Austin. It's right off the corner of Lamar and Barton Springs Boulevard, right around the corner there.
Yep.
And it's the best hat shop in the world. Go by and say hello to Raz, Red Wine. And he's got some partners up in Aspen. So I go to either one of those two shops, but they're like lights out the best. And, you can get a custom job, just spectacular. So Aspen Hatters, they're at Barton Springs and Lamar. Check them out. And
that's kind of perfect for you because Austin and Colorado, or Texas and Colorado, are kind of your two homes. So
it was amazing. I couldn't believe it when I was in Aspen one time, and I just realized there was this hat shop that had started in Austin. And the only reason I didn't know about it is because I had just left Austin right before they started their shop, which was 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah,
maybe 5 at this point. But it's the best.
So for those that don't know, you're actually returning to Colorado. This is not like you didn't leave Texas for Colorado. You're from Colorado originally.
No, I was born here, grew up here, and I got to Texas when I was about 20 or so and lived in Austin for about 40 years and, just loved it. It's ironic because growing up in Colorado, most people don't like Texas. There's just this weird Colorado thing about Texans generally. And it mostly has to do with them taking over the ski areas and can't drive in the snow. Of course, not realizing that it's subsidizing it for all the rest of the Colorado people.
Right.
But anyway, because of that, when I left Colorado, I on my list of places I thought I'd end up, Texas was 50th. And so, but for a bunch of weird reasons that were musical, really, in origin, I ended up in Austin in the mid-'70s. And just instantly fell in love with it, and then subsequently fell in love with Texas and everything about Texas. So I've got a deep and abiding love for Texas, and it was hard to leave, but grandkids in Colorado made it easier. So that's the reason I'm back here, is because I've got grandkids here now and wanted to be close to them growing up.
Yeah, I'm from the Seattle area, and that's what we've done to my parents. They are down here in Texas.
Oh yeah,
Because,
great.
the grandkids are the ultimate
Yep.
draw.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
in fact, her mother was at a school district up in Everett, Washington, and because the school year closed, she could still work remotely. So it's like, come on down to Texas before everything closes up. So
Yeah, good. Well, it makes a huge difference. I'm sure you appreciate her being there.
Oh,
absolutely.
absolutely.
100%. Well, look, we thank you again for doing this. We can't.
Yeah, it's great to catch up again.
I know it is, and
I love what you're doing. It's awesome.
Thank you.
yeah. So like, let's start off with. We'll do a little bit of non-politics, then we'll go into politics because that's what you do, and then we'll finish in some more whiskey drinking if we can. But how did you get into whiskey? Bourbon,
Well,
I think, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I love to drink. For starters.
I mean, you kind of have to if you're going to work in politics, right?
Well, yeah,
You need a drink.
yeah. So in politics broadly, but on our show too. If you've ever watched it, we spend a lot of time eating and drinking.
Yes.
And my co-hosts are it's hard to keep up with them, and we do a fair amount of imbibing. And I have to say that all of us are big whiskey fans, and I get to it mostly because in part because the first time I got really drunk as a kid was on scotch, right? And so I hate scotch. I just have my memories. That was my first bad drunk and throwing up and all that stuff. And I doubt that I've had more than a glass or two of scotch since then. So I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate scotch. I'll occasionally dabble in a vodka, but as Spencer, as you know, it's not very. It doesn't have the. It's pretty simple. It's not complex, and it doesn't have the kind of bourbon.
Flavor profile.
Yeah. Vodka is kind of vodka, and there's.
Yeah.
What'd you say? What are its two main ingredients, Spencer?
Ethanol and water.
Ethanol and water. There you go. There's lots of times I like ethanol and water. But if I want a real drink that has taste and complexity and flavor, man, bourbon is my go-to drink. And you probably, this would probably qualify me as a whiskey sissy in your ranks, but I'm not a professional whiskey drinker in the sense of my kind of go-to is Maker's Mark, and which is just your standby old school, because it's got a little sweetness to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how you describe that in bourbon terms, but I just like I have kind of a sweet tooth, so I like a little sweetness in my bourbon. So
yeah,
I love Makers. And the other thing I love about bourbon is that, and again, you probably are anti the notion of mixing anything with a good bourbon.
Oh no,
especially
all right, okay, but I love Manhattans. So Manhattan, that is my main drink is Manhattans. I love Manhattan. The other two that are big on our show are Pappy Van Winkle and Michter's. So I realize those aren't Texas, but those are two that my co-hosts like, and so those are two. But I'm really looking forward to a package that you delivered so I can taste the best whiskey in America, which is made in Texas.
That's right.
Yeah.
You do, and we sent you a little box with a Texas Whiskey Trail shirt, our Still Strong shirt. Mm-hmm. We have given you a membership to the Texas Whiskey Trail, so the next time you come down here,
awesome.
Flash your card, check in on the system, and you can get free tours at every distillery. So you're going to get one of these as well. So you could mix a drink in here if you wanted to.
Oh, you totally could.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
As one of our members says they have a group called the Whiskey Tribe on YouTube. If you haven't checked it out, go ahead and check it out here in Austin. But their mantra is the best whiskey is the whiskey you like to drink.
That's right.
Right.
I like that. Very good.
So
that's my mantra. That's my mantra. Then.
No, I regularly.
So here's a little Makers.
That's right.
There you go. Cheers
there you
to
go.
That.
Yeah, and mix it with a little Topo Chico or a little Waterloo sparkling water.
It's good stuff.
That's a great way to have kind of like a little cocktail without all the work. I'm all about the cocktails that don't have the work.
Yeah.
I like it.
So Charles is one of our prolific trailblazers here in Texas. He says Balcones Texas Bach, and I actually wish I had a bottle here to show you, but Shiner Bock worked with Balcones.
Oh, cool.
They took their mash bill and their yeast profile. Balcones brewed it and then distilled it into and matured it for 2 years to create a straight malt whiskey based out of Shiner Bock. So it's like Texas peanut butter and Texas chocolate. It was like this amazing.
I love that. Well, I'm a big fan of Shiner Bock, and I remember doing that. There used to be, maybe it still was a big bike ride. We'd ride down to the Shiner Bock brewery and have a beers, and they didn't want us to ride after that, so we'd get bused back to Austin.
That's fantastic.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So John corrected. It's the best whiskey is the whiskey you like to drink the way you like to drink it.
I love it. That's my motto, man. That's cool.
Right. So let's deviate for a second from whiskey. We'll come back to it. We promise. But let's talk politics. When did you leave Austin again?
Well, leave to go to Colorado about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I was kind of coming back and forth for a number of years, and just over time, I was spending less and less time coming back to Texas, especially after the grandkids came.
So it was right about the same time that you started the Circus, right?
Yeah, very close to that. Yeah, because we started the Circus in late 2015, early 2016. So that'd be about the time I came back to Colorado. Yep.
And I think a lot of people probably don't know this about you, but you actually pitched this. This is your brainchild, right?
Yeah, and not only did I pitch it, but I pitched it forever. I mean, I first started pitching the idea of the show in 2003.
Okay.
So
Wow.
so that's how long. I mean, I could write a whole book on Hollywood and how that works, but it was mind-numbing experience because you have meetings and they get all excited and you think you've got a yes, and then the phone doesn't ring, and it's waiting and waiting. And we were first at Netflix for like a long time, and just for a bunch of different reasons they couldn't do it for technical reasons. And then we were at HBO, and they were really excited about it. And then at the very last second, we discovered they had a conflict of interest with another broadcasting network in their family of networks and shows. And so I thought it was done at that point. And then at the last second, Showtime just showed up and said, we're all in. So, and they've been a great partner. I think we're really lucky that we ended up at Showtime because, well, for a lot of reasons, but they've just been great partners.
And it couldn't have been at a better time because you picked the biggest, most circus-like election in history.
Well, that was dumb luck. I mean, that was total luck of the draw because we had no idea that was going to happen. And of course, it was spectacularly dramatic.
Yeah.
And no matter if you were Republican or Democrat or anywhere in between, you were interested. If you weren't interested in politics, you got interested in politics either then or shortly after the election, which is, to your point earlier, I thought it was going to be kind of one and done, maybe come back in 2020. It was designed to be a show about campaigns. And then a week into the administration, the suits at Showtime called and said, hey, the circus hadn't stopped, get back out there. And I was at first skeptical. I was like, I don't know, it's Washington, it's static, how interesting could that be? Well, as it turns out, pretty damn interesting.
Yeah, like I know that the virus and everything is kind of homebound to everybody. I think you said that you only missed one show from the last round that you had to stop production on. But how much are you missing being a part of that the circus that's happening right now?
Well, I mean, the thing about the thing about our show is first of all it's really intensive to produce it because we basically make a documentary every week. We do in a week what used to take people like a year to do. So it's super intensive and it's really hard to do. And we do like 20 on a typical year, like 26 episodes, which is half the year. And that's twice the number of what a regular show would be. Most seasons are about 13 episodes.
Yeah.
So it's a ton of work. But the problem is so much goes on under this president that every time we go off the air, everybody's like, why are you off the air now? This is happening, that's happening. Right. There's just no good time to go off the air. But the fact is that right now it'd be pretty hard to produce our show because it's just not much to do. I mean, Biden's stuck in his basement. Trump's not doing rallies. So it's actually working out pretty well. And we just hope that by August, something's going to be happening that we can cover. But it's going to be different for sure. I mean, our world has changed in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways it'll be changed for good,
Well, that's actually a great segue because what I think we would love to talk with you about specifically is that the world is, I think, inextricably changed, right? I think there's something different. Everybody feels it. You watch TV and you see things that happened before COVID and then things that happened after. There's like this delineation point, right? And everybody's like, well, we're going to return to normal. We're going to return to normal. I don't know that we are. And I definitely don't think we are politically, because it seems like a lot of the political rules have been thrown out the window, if there are any left, right? If there are any rules left. But what have you seen as the biggest political shift that's been happening as a result of the COVID outbreak?
Well, it's completely changed. I mean, all the conventional ways in which we campaign have been kind of thrown out the window. You know, like I said, Joe Biden's stuck in a basement. He's the nominee and he needs to raise a bunch of money, but he can't go travel around the country. Trump thrives on rallies and he can't do his rallies. So people are having to figure out new and different ways to communicate. And, you know, a lot of them are doing what we're doing right now.
Exactly.
And so that's people are just trying to figure it out. I tell you, a good example is the conventions. They're going to be different. I was responsible for planning, not just me, but I had a role in planning the 2004 election conventions. And even back then, we had a lot of conversations about the fact that conventions were pretty anachronistic. I mean, there's just these kind of ridiculous rolling 3 to 5 day parties with endless speeches by, you know, endless lines of, you know, people that weren't that interesting, segued with a bunch of bad entertainment. So I think that the conventions, they're going to happen in some form, but a lot of it will be virtual.
Yeah.
And a lot of it will be changed. And that's something that actually needed to happen anyway. And I don't think the conventions are ever going to be the same again. So that'll be kind of a permanent change. And I think something that was, you know, was sort of needed to happen anyway. And COVID just kind of pushed it. So what we may discover is that some things that we have to do differently, maybe we should have been doing differently anyway.
Right.
That's right. So one question that I wanted to ask that's kind of, it's a very broad question, but we've seen a lot about governors right now, right? We've seen Cuomo doing things. We've seen a lot of stories about individual relationships between governors and their constituents. The powers have been exercised at the governor level at a much broader level than I think we've seen in a long time. What kind of impact do you think this is going to have at the state governorship level? Because it seems like that's where the action is a lot of the time.
Well, it is. And the kind of irony of that is that before COVID was happening, I remember getting lots of questions from journalists about how politics had shifted to an extent that it was all kind of federal. In other words, all the attention was on the president, on Trump. We never heard from the governors anymore. They were kind of out of the picture. Well, that's completely flipped now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now all the attention's on the governors. And suddenly, you know, these governors who've been kind of ignored for a long time now, and it's has sort of been cast as somewhat irrelevant, at least in the sort of national dialogue, have suddenly, you know, popped on the screen and done so in a big way. And you know, this has shown. Government, state government versus federal elections, about federalism and what that means. What's the responsibilities of the states have? What does the federal government have? And, you know, interestingly, kind of what's happened with the Trump administration, the president, is he's realized how overwhelmed he is and, you know, what a political liability that can be. So he sort of kicked it to the governors to say, okay, you guys handle this now.
Right.
You know, with the hope that A, that they will, but B, also that I think that they'll shoulder some of the political liability to the extent there is some. But at least up until now, what's happened is the governors have become enormously popular. And, you know, across the board, it's really remarkable to see. I mean, Cuomo's the most, you know, is the greatest example just because New York is ground zero.
Right.
But, you know, I mean, I'll give you my, I mean, I of course knew who Cuomo was, but I'd heard, but I didn't watch him that closely.
Yeah.
And I'd heard a lot of stuff about him, mostly negative. And then I saw him doing his you know, the first couple of daily briefings that I saw. I was like, holy crap, this guy is fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, this is what leadership's all about. This is Crisis 101. This is what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to look, how you're supposed to sound, what you're supposed to say, what you're supposed to do. And so this has really elevated the platform for governors in a big way. And they and a lot of them have, you know, huge new profiles now. and it's it's testing everybody, and it's it's a very it's hazardous and difficult for everybody. But the governors have really stepped up.
Well, one governor that you knew very, very well. You knew several governors really well, including George W. Bush, who you knew as a governor, obviously, and then you worked on his presidential campaigns. Who, by the way, he put out a fantastic video and statement. I mean, that was unbelievable.
Yeah, I love that. I hear from a lot of people, or have heard over the last couple of years. Why aren't we hearing from George W. Bush, and shouldn't he be inserting himself more? Well, to his credit, he hasn't.
Yeah,
and that's part of his MO, and I think that's why he's been a very respected ex-president. Maybe not go down as one of the great presidents, but he'll go down as a great ex-president, just the way he's kind of handled his business, and very humbly, very he doesn't want to sort of stay on the radar screen and get in everybody else's business. But this video was extraordinarily it's the George Bush that I know and others love, at just the right time, I think, with just the right message. And it was super powerful. And I think it made a lot of people, realize what kind of message you want from leadership at a time like this, that was reflected in that video. And B, it made a lot of people, including a lot of Democrats I heard from, kind of, reassessing George W. Bush, which reminds me of the great, there's billboards around Texas, mostly in Texas, where it's just got a big, huge photo of George W. with a big goofy grin, and he's going like this, and the caption is, "Miss me yet?"
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
And a lot of people are. I mean, Donald Trump's done a lot for George W.'s legacy, I have to say.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's true.
Well, another Texas governor that you knew very well, and I actually had the pleasure of officing next to for about 6 months at Public Strategies, is Ann Richards.
Yeah.
And I every once in a while I think back to, like, we worked on McCain and straight talk and being a layman, and the way you describe politics to the public has had its moments throughout history, and Ann Richards was one of those, right?
Epic character, epic governor. She shattered glass ceilings left and right all her life, and was just an icon, really, and iconic in this, because of just who she was, but also, the fact, she was the first elected governor woman in Texas.
Right.
And to overcome that kind of history took extraordinary talent, because, the reality is that, Clady Williams should have won that race. Texas had really become Republican at that point, or certainly was moving heavily in that direction. And she just out-campaigned him and kind of flipped the deck on him a few times in a really smart way. And George W. proved 4 years later that, that Texans really wanted a Republican, but they voted for Ann Richards because she was tough and sassy, and that's what Texans like in a governor.
Yeah, she was the definition of a crossover candidate in many ways, right?
She sure was.
Straight talk and that truth telling is it's something that I learned from you, is that there is a proper way to tell the truth, right? There's I think one of the best examples that I learned from you was when you did the Man in the Arena convention, right?
Right.
And brought in the example from 9/11 when he went out onto the mound, when George W. Bush went onto the mound and pitched the strike down the middle at Yankee Stadium, and that was kind of this way of telling the truth in an artful way, right? You don't have to be a spin doctor all the time. You can tell the truth artfully.
Well, in fact, the best spin these days is no spin. And, people are desperate and hungry for authenticity because they feel like they're lied to all the time. So if you can find a way to tell the truth in a way that's believable, that's the most powerful communication in politics.
Yeah. And if you can, I don't know if you can read it here, but it says, "Taste the truth."
All right, excellent. Love that.
That was the tagline that we wanted to come up with, because that was the issue in Texas, is that we wanted people to understand that these whiskeys are being made by artisans here in the state, and they're benefiting the Texas economy, and so on and so forth. And so I want to thank you for helping educate me on that personally.
I love it. That's a great motto. I love what you're doing there.
Thank you. So what we're doing now is we're trying to I'm not going to ask you, but we are trying to influence the governor of Texas to help out Texas Distillers, because governors do have a lot of authority right now. And as you know, Texas is an every 2-year legislative cycle, and we happen to be in the middle of a non-legislative year. Yeah. So no laws can be created. There's a lot of power at the governor level to be able to do things, waive provisions, do emergency orders. What do you, and we're talking about Cuomo, that's an example, right? New York State has allowed their distillers to ship directly to the public. Because there's no really good way for craft distilleries specifically that make most of their revenue from tourism to get their product out to the market in bulk, right? And then there's new apps like Drizzly and a few others that you may have seen where you can order liquor from a store to your house via delivery. That follows the tiered system. But a lot of the craft distilleries are not in there. And you hear a lot about people increasing their amount of drinking at home during the pandemic, and that is absolutely true. I hope you're enjoying some as well during this time. But there's about a 200% increase total in spirits delivery. But they're all the large name brands, national name brands by and large, because they have the largest distribution. So these craft distillers that don't have this kind of distribution are looking for ways to get their product out that otherwise would have people coming from a tourist perspective and buying a couple of bottles when they're there.
Right. And beyond that, I mean, because Texas is so large.
Yes.
Even if you wanted to go and pick up whiskey from each distillery or your favorite distillery that may be, several hundred miles away, it's not a smart thing to do right now.
Yes.
Like, you don't need to be out doing that. So, but you want to get that bottle. So we're trying to figure out another way to make that happen.
So my question to you is around authority of governors and their ability to kind of pick and choose. And I'm not asking you to weigh in on this particular issue, but what do you think governors' authority is to pick and choose which industries they decide to help? What are they looking at?
Well, I'm happy to weigh on it with what I've just heard about it, because it seems so contrary to common sense.
Yeah.
And what I would guess would be politically a smart move for the governor. I mean, first of all, to your point, you wouldn't have believed what happened here in Colorado when for about an hour they decided to shut down liquor stores.
Yeah.
I have never seen pitchforks come out so fast. It was incredible. Yeah. So yes, I mean, this is something that we like in normal times and we really love in abnormal times.
Right.
And people should have that opportunity and be able to do it easily and cheaply and conveniently. And I don't know, to me, to exert any barriers on distribution of any kind doesn't make sense. But particularly because of Texas ethos, and Governor Abbott's general support for small businesses and all things Texas, I would. Notion of why he isn't is he just really hasn't heard enough about it. So I say, Governor, get behind these guys.
Yes. Maybe add that clip to the letters.
Yeah, I know. Craig says he sent a letter and got a response from his representative, which was not encouraging. What else can we do? I've heard that actually from a lot of folks, is that there certain reps have been contacting either TABC or others, and that they've been getting little to no response, or if they do, it's like, oh, it's not legally possible, but it is. The governor has.
Well, I mean, that's the one thing that I think we've all learned by this that was at first a little concerning, which is both the federal and state governments. I think people are looking at going, oh my God, I had no idea that the president and/or / governors could do all this. I mean, they can. Yeah. Basically, what this has shown is they can do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, and that's the really odd thing to me. And the next point that I was going to bring up is that if you have this kind of total authority at the executive level, especially when there's no legislature in session, especially when it's an emergency order, what does that do politically to what we're in right now? Getting to decide winners and losers based on on the authority of a single or a small set of Americans seems a little bit iffy.
Well, again, it just seems contrary to me to the sort of Texas way to do things, which is, support Texans. It sounds like the laws are currently constructed to help the outsiders and people from other states and the big guys. Texas likes to support small business, the entrepreneurs, and that's who you represent. So it's confounding to me that he wouldn't be supporting your efforts.
Yeah, it's confounding to us as well.
It's confounding to us too. We would love for, like I said, we've mobilized over 11,000 folks so far, and we would love to see that. And by the way, it's not just us. I mean, there's the manufacturing tier, the brewery side, for example, they can't deliver either. People can pick up a certain number of I think a case at a craft brewery, and they would benefit from the ability to deliver within their county, do things like that. But these blue laws, and this is what I think is most interesting to me on a very high level, is that these blue laws that effectively have been around since Prohibition, right? And ironically, the last time there was Prohibition is the last time there was a massive pandemic. It was the Spanish flu and Prohibition at the same time. That everything has been kind of an echo of that last 100 years, right? And we still have laws on the books that prevent the distribution of alcohol and make it a very controlled thing. And every state has their own rules. There is no federal rule for how to ship between states. What do you think this is going to do to people? Like what I've seen is that it's exposed a lot of laws on the books for the arcane nature of them, of what they are, right? And what do you think this is going to do in the future?
Well, hopefully expose and make people aware of how archaic it is. I mean, it's very interesting for me to hear you say the term blue laws, because I hadn't heard that term in so long. I'd forgotten about it. But I remember being in Texas and remember when I first discovered what blue laws were. And even then, it was crazy. Most of the blue, I think mostly it pertained to not shopping on Sundays and lots just other things that just didn't make sense in the current.
Still illegal to sell alcohol on Sunday.
It's still illegal?
Yeah.
That's not
yeah, so there's no bottle sales at the distilleries on Sundays.
Yes.
Oh, that's crazy. That's crazy.
But yeah.
Well, like I said, I hopefully what'll happen is that this will just help expose.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just a matter of the governor is dealing with such a mountain of stuff right now that it just hadn't gotten.
That's
yeah. So I'll try and think about this a little bit, and maybe offline we can talk a little bit about some ideas.
Yeah. Well, but from a law changing and exposing the laws for what they are perspective, I think this is going to do a lot to get people motivated back into that local level. I would hope. Yeah, for sure. Because we're talking about blue laws, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because you're now in a state where we'll call them green laws, right? You got legalized marijuana. There's there's a lot of libertarian policies going into Colorado right now. Yeah. And it's interesting too because it's happening under a Democratic governor, and this Democratic governor is probably the most forward-leaning governor on reopening the state in the nation. And the reason for that is he comes from a business background. Right. Yeah. He's an entrepreneur. And so, it just seems to me that, Texas has always done a really good job of both perception and reality of being pro-business. And this seems to me like a very pro-business issue.
Absolutely. And for sure, pro-small business.
Yeah.
And it just is remarkable what they have done with the sanitizer.
Yeah.
In the last.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, and hopefully he's heard that, and that should help make the case. Well,
ironically, he has retweeted a post about a couple of our distillers at Whitmire's Distilling. I'll give them some credit. Travis and Chris Whitmire, they're two veterans, and they have put together basically a military operation. They've hired 80 furloughed bartenders. Yeah. And they're pretty much running 24/7 producing sanitizer, giving out a free bottle per car to anybody who drives through. And they have rules. So if you hear that, go check their website and look at it for yourselves. But them and these folks, Gulf Coast Distillers, have produced a ton and shared a lot of it's both in Houston. and shared a lot of their assets, or not assets, but shared a lot of their, sanitizer with other distilleries because the FDA had a very specific formula that you had to meet, right? And getting resources for like denaturing materials and stuff like that has been very difficult. But that is a very Texas thing. You saw that when you were here. You see it all the time. We saw it in Hurricane Harvey. Texans like to take care of each other. Yeah. And that's something that you saw. And we're hoping that the governor sees that and wants to help us in return. But what's your experience in with Texans and Texas industry helping out in a time of crisis?
Well, I think about Rick Perry did a really good job when he was governor, and I think about the hurricanes and just kind of rolling up his sleeves. I think that really helped brand Perry as a crisis guy, who was always kind of went right into the middle of the action and just kind of it was a very Texan thing to help others and to help the little guy. And again, that's part of that Texas ethos that me coming from Colorado, when I got to Texas, I was like, this is a real thing. It's not just some fabled fiction about Texans and Texas. They help the little guy, they stand up, they roll up their sleeves, they jump in and help out, and that's just the way Texas rolls. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, let's have a drink, because I think it's time for that. So I'm gonna pour a couple. So first, I got to give a shout out to Dan Garrison Brothers, the first legal bourbon distillery in Texas. We also have Balcones over here, and we have the reigning champion, best bourbon in the world right here, Iron Root Harbinger. So Mark, when you do get a sample of that, please let us know what you think.
Looking forward to it. In the meantime, I'll just stay with the modest maker's mark here.
There ain't nothing wrong with that. Seriously.
So give me a little 101 here, Spencer. What are you looking for when you're tasting that?
So unlike you, I actually cut my teeth on Scotch. So I bartended at the Hyatt Regency during college, right downtown there by the Bat Bridge. And one of the first things I did is I got into a Scotch class for 2 days where they taught us through all the different regions. My guess is that you probably got yourself a really smoky, peaty Islay Scotch, and you didn't like the peaty, smoky taste, right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, because what a lot of people don't know about Scotch is that there's so many different regions, so many different styles of Scotch that you can get a sweet, either like an Oloroso sherry barrel finished one, or
if you like sweet and you like kind of your sweeter bourbons, you might like Balvenie. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, Balvenie is a great Scotch, but not all of them are those peaty, smoky bombs.
I don't like those either, Mark. I'm with you.
Yeah, that was the first whiskey I let her try too, and she was like, "This tastes like tires."
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah, but then I got into bourbon, and what I love about Texas whiskey is that we have all the regions of Scotland can fit into a triangle between Dallas, College Station, and Austin. That's Scotland, in land mass, right? And they have 5 regions and 5 distinct types of different Scotch. And Texas we have 4 regions that are separated even further. And climate makes such a huge impact on how whiskey is matured, right? So in Scotland, you'll have pretty much a 20 degree swing all year, maybe, like that 40 to 60 degree kind of range. Here we get, as you know, 50 degree swings overnight. So that means that the whiskey's going in and out of the wood very frequently, every time the temperature changes, every time the barometric pressure changes. And that in and out of the wood, that breathing action is actually what gives the whiskey its color and character and pulls all those wood sugars out to give it the flavors, right? So what I love about Texas whiskey is that it doesn't taste like anywhere else in the world. It's completely unique. And it's all of the varieties, whether it's a single malt or a rye or a bourbon or any of the other different whiskey varieties, which there's hundreds of, but you have all of those things but it is distinctly unique because of Texas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking forward to, at some point we'll give you a tasting and we'll go through a lot of them and and get you caught up.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
Well, actually, my sister lives in Boulder, Mark. So the next,
Great.
and so sometimes
Yes.
we road trip it up there or fly.
Yeah.
Depends. So next time we'll bring some goodies with us and make sure.
Well, come see me in the mountains. I've got a wonderful guest house.
Nice.
Fabulous. That sounds wonderful.
Well,
that sounds really good right now. Actually.
It sounds a lot better than our back and forth to
Yeah.
our quarantined office with no employees who are all at home, and then here.
Yeah.
But Mark, just to kind of wrap it up and put a bow on it, why don't you tell people about the Circus and what it is, when you think you guys are going to be back, and what people can look forward to in this circus of a political year.
Well, thanks. It's interesting, when we first came up with the name, the Circus, they were really like, oh man, I don't know, that's a little over the top. And that was kind of before it all happened. And now,
Yeah.
Now it's insane by comparison.
You're right, exactly right. So anyway, it is a real-time documentary. And what that means is that we start shooting on a Monday, and then we put together a show for the next Sunday. And I don't think in 60 something episodes we've ever put anything on a Sunday that was more than 6 days old. And that was I love politics and I love campaigns, and my whole inspiration for it was that I'd seen so much stuff behind the scenes in campaigns that I found fascinating, interesting, educational, amusing, entertaining, that most of the public never sees. Like 90% of it, the public, they just see these press conferences and things that are, pre-packaged, but they never see the real stuff that happens behind the scenes. And I thought that would be fun and interesting for people to see. But importantly to me, it had to be real time. In other words, it couldn't be something that'd be like 6 months later looking back.
Yeah.
And that was part of the issue we had with Netflix. They just couldn't program it that fast. And they would come back and say, well, can we do it like, quarterly or monthly? I said, I don't think so. I think it's got to be right on top of it, like you're in the cockpit as it's happening. And I think that's a big reason why the show works for a couple of reasons. One is just because of what's happening. People are fascinated by it. It's like we have this national civics lesson going on, and we provide a once a week fun, fast documentary. We don't take it too seriously, but we're serious about politics. But we do it in a fun documentary style. That's kind of fast and furious, and roll it up every Sunday night. So you can, if you're junkies like it, because it's just very, behind the scenes stuff, but also people who are just casually interested in politics like it because it's a quick way to kind of get educated on what happened the last week, so that you can tune in Sunday night and go to work or school and be pretty caught up on what's going on.
Yeah.
And so that's really it in a nutshell. And like I said, I had thought it was just going to be one season and maybe come back, 4 years later, but we're now in our 5th season, 60 something episodes in. And, so we've got another fascinating election here on the horizon. And so we'll be there in the middle of it.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of my friends who I talk to ask about the show, I tell them, if you like Hard Knocks, it's like Hard Knocks for politics.
That's exactly how we pitched it, Spencer. That was the elevator pitch. It was Hard Knocks for politics. That's exactly it.
Together or something.
That was it. That was the elevator pitch.
I think something like that is so great, because actually when we met, you were in DC at that point. You weren't on the campaign yet. But eventually I moved to the East Coast so we could figure out if we were going to be a thing or not.
Yeah.
And
we are.
Turns out it worked. No, but I had no political background.
Yeah.
Just none. And I remember just going to parties and events and happy hours and dinners and all that. Like the amount that I learned in that 7 months that we were there was kind of insane. And I think people don't realize that. I think they see, to your point, the press conferences, these little bits of things, and they think that's kind of it. And it's not. There's so much more to it. So I'm excited to have something like this as well. Well,
and the other thing I like about it, Mark, is that like for all these people who think that there's like a mask, I don't want to say conspiracy, but there's something in the background and people pulling the strings. And it's actually just a lot of people. It's a lot of people with human foibles.
Yeah.
The best.
Yeah, it's a high human drama, and there's lots of interesting characters in this orbit besides the main players, that are fascinating people. So we just kind of pull back the curtains. That's what we do, and let you see what's going on behind the scenes. And there's a lot that's pretty damned interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I've got to do my last little plug for everybody to visit stillstrongtx.com. Take action. Let the governor know that these distillers need some help.
Yes.
Mark, what do you think, to kind of cap it off, you lived in Texas your whole life. What do you think Texans need to know about helping Texans?
Well, that is the most Texan thing you can do. I mean, that's how the place was built in the past, and that's how it's going to get to in the future. And, the reason that Texas kicks ass is because it's historically kicked ass, and it's kicked ass, for the little guy. And in order to have a future as bold as its past, it's got to keep kicking it.
Well, that is the best way to end this. Mark, stick around a little bit. I also have to say two things. One, hi to Annie and your whole family. I hope everybody's safe and good.
They are. Thank you.
Okay. And second, happy birthday, sir.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Happy birthday. Is it today?
It was yesterday, correct?
Okay, well, happy birthday.
65, free healthcare.
Yay. You couldn't have come at a perfect time. You got this timing thing down.
I do.
So, cheers to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. If y'all want a example of what you can see on the circus, we'll play this little clip for you. And Mark, stick around and we'll chat with you off air. So, take care, y'all.
Mark McKinnon has been a political consultant for years. He's respected by everybody I know in politics.
Just look for the hat.
So my dad was a rancher for a while.
And he had a hat just like this one.
I can't sit down with a cowboy and not drink whiskey.
We do a lot of drinking
Bourbon,
on our
single
show.
malt.